You really think you're gonna win against her? That's what my neighbor said when I peeled the violation notice off my cabin door. The ink was still damp, and the tape had left a smear on the cedar frame my father built with his own hands. I didn't answer him, not then, because the truth was, I wasn't sure. I'd seen what Karen did to the last guy who pushed back. His garden was gone in a week. Deck ripped out, fines stacked so high, he sold and left. But this place, this cabin, wasn't just real estate. It was all I had left of my father. He died swinging a hammer on this land, and I'd be damned if I let anyone bulldoze it, especially not with my kids sleeping inside. I wasn't supposed to survive this kind of fight, but I knew building codes, I knew pressure points, and this time, I'd make sure someone was watching. This is how it started. Tell me, where are you watching from? You're out of compliance, Daniel. That means it comes down. Karen Whitmore didn't even look up from her clipboard. She just slapped the notice against the cedar siding, right beneath the old copper thermometer my dad mounted 20 years ago. Except this structure predates the HOA, I said, not moving from the top step. You might want to check section 6.1 of the county charter before you bring a backhoe up my hill. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. She scoffed and clicked her pen, like that ended the matter. You've already been warned twice. Final notice. My name's Daniel Harkins, civil engineer. I've spent 16 years inspecting unsafe bridges and failed foundations, things that collapse when pressure is applied wrong. So when I say I know what's legal load and what's unsupported garbage, I mean it. And Karen? She was long overdue for structural failure. What she didn't know that morning was this. The moment she set foot on my porch, I started recording. That cabin wasn't just shelter. It was the last thing my dad ever built before the cancer took him. Every nail in those beams, we drove them together the summer I turned 16. He taught me how to square a joint, how to brace a wall so it wouldn't bow over time, how to spot dry rot by the smell alone. I proposed to Emily under that roof. I brought both my kids home to it after the hospital. We weathered a layoff, a miscarriage, and a storm that peeled half the shingles clean off, but the cabin stood. So when Karen said it had to come down to match aesthetic modernization requirements, I didn't just hear Hoey overreach. I heard the threat of losing the only place in the world that felt like ours. You can't grandfather in decay, Daniel, she said over her shoulder, walking back toward the road. Her SUV idled behind the HOA security truck. Unsafe is unsafe. But I'd already read the code, and I knew the only thing unsafe was her understanding of it. The notice she posted wasn't even signed by a city official. It was HOA letterhead, unverified, unfiled, and, more importantly, unpermitted. She might have gotten away with it if I hadn't spent the past week watching what she did to the neighbors. The family 2 doors down lost their deck because Karen said it was 2 inches past the setback line. The older couple by the bend, fined $900 for painting their shutters forest green instead of approved olive. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. This was about control. I pulled the notice from the siding and brought it inside. Emily was at the sink, feeding oatmeal to our toddler, who was trying his best to paint the high chair tray with banana mush. She gave the final notice, I said quietly, folding the paper. Emily didn't say anything at first. Then, what does that mean? I looked down at the paper again. It was typed in bold Arial, not even letter formatted. The threat was clear. Removal by force if I didn't comply within 48 hours. It means she thinks we're too scared to fight. Emily met my eyes. Are we? I shook my head. Not anymore. I spent the rest of that day quietly prepping. I wasn't just going to sit and wait. I was going to get ahead of her. The live stream wasn't an afterthought, it was step one. Because Karen counted on people being isolated, intimidated, embarrassed into silence. But the thing about pressure is, it doesn't just break things. It also reveals what's solid underneath. If you're still watching, stick with me. This is about to go somewhere she never saw coming. The next morning, I walked down to the community park with my son, strapped to my back, and my mind spinning through building codes, enforcement ordinances, and video footage. Karen had crossed a line, but she wasn't reckless, she was strategic. And I needed to understand the pattern before I broke it. The neighborhood's 4th of July bunting still sagged between the trees, faded and curling at the edges. A few families were already out, pushing strollers, tossing tennis balls to lazy retrievers. Normalcy, the kind Karen liked to keep on display. "Hey, Daniel." I turned. It was Mike Tran, 3 houses up the ridge from me. Quiet guy, 2 kids, never raised his voice at a board meeting. "You got one too?" he asked, motioning to the folded paper sticking out of my jacket pocket. I nodded. "Final notice." He shook his head and whistled low. Same wording they used on my fence. Said it didn't meet height specs. Took me 3 weekends to rebuild it. Then she said the new one wasn't visually harmonious. Find me anyway. I looked past him at the playground. The swings were empty. A mom sat on the bench nearby, scanning her phone, her expression tense. "How many people's been hit?" I asked. Mike didn't answer right away. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded spreadsheet, handwritten. "She thinks we're not talking to each other," he said quietly, "but we are now." The list had names, addresses, violation types, fines, 23 residents, all fined or threatened within the last 6 months, all with one thing in common: older homes, inherited cabins, or properties that hadn't been modernized. This wasn't enforcement, it was targeting. "She said I'd lose my gate," came another voice. "Carla, from the house down by the lake. Her husband was a veteran retired Navy. It's been there since we moved in. Said it wasn't up to aesthetic code. I asked her to show me where. She said the rules are interpretable by committee discretion." A chill settled in my stomach. Not because it was new, but because it wasn't. Karen was rewriting the rules by enforcing the ones that no one could challenge. Or thought they couldn't. That's how these HOAs win. Silence, isolation. Shame. You think you're the only one. But now the silence was breaking. "She ever file permits for any of these?" I asked, flipping through the list. Mike raised an eyebrow. "Permits? I doubt she's filed anything official since last year." That was the thread. I could feel it. If she'd acted without city permits, if she'd made this many removals, fines, demolitions, changes, there would be a trail. Or, more dangerously, no trail at all. "Has anyone ever called the city directly?" "Everyone's too afraid," Carla said. "She says we're a private community, that we have to go through the HOA." I stood in that park, surrounded by low conversations and guarded stares, and realized Karen hadn't just abused power, she'd isolated it. Created a bubble where no one dared question her. That bubble needed bursting, and I had the one thing she didn't expect: professional credibility. I wasn't some emotional homeowner yelling about injustice. I was a state-certified engineer who could document exactly how illegal her actions were, especially if I could tie her threats to broader safety violations. But first, I had to keep the pressure from falling back on these families. "I'm not going to let her take my cabin," I said, folding the list and sliding it into my jacket. "And I'm not going to let her do it to anyone else either." Carla looked up. "You going to the city?" "Number." I looked toward the road where HOA security had just cruised by, slow and watchful. "I'm going through the city, and I'm going to make sure they have everything they need to come down on her. Hard." Karen thought the neighborhood was hers. She was about to find out what happens when the right people start watching. I didn't call the city that afternoon. I drove straight to the HOA office. Not the shiny one in the clubhouse that was for residents. I went around back, where the board members had their private entrance. The hallway inside smelled like copier ink and air freshener that didn't quite cover the mildew. Dim fluorescence buzzed overhead. I walked past framed posters about community excellence and pride in Pine living, all hollow words. Karen's door was open. She was leaning against her desk, speaking to someone I couldn't see. "If he resists, we escalate," she said, voice low but steady. "That's what the board empowered us to do. He's out of compliance. You saw the photos." I stopped just shy of the corner, heart ticking a little faster. "But the cabin's sound," came a second voice. Soft, cautious. "It's old, but it isn't dangerous." I stepped into view. Mara Jensen turned quickly, guilt flashing across her face like a warning light. Karen, however, didn't flinch. "Speak of the devil." I kept my eyes on Mara. "Mind if I speak to you a minute?" Karen crossed her arms. "We're in the middle of a board matter." "I'll wait," I said. "Unless the board matters are now decided without quorum." That hit a nerve. Karen's jaw tightened. "Mara, step outside if you want to waste time." Mara hesitated, then moved toward me without looking back. We walked down the hall in silence until we reached the small mailroom near the end. The door clicked shut behind us. She didn't speak right away. Her fingers twisted the silver ring on her right hand. "You don't agree with this, do you?" I asked quietly. Her eyes flicked up. I didn't vote for the demolition. But you didn't vote against it either. I abstained. She said it like a confession. I nodded, waiting, letting the silence stretch. I'd used the same technique in dozens of site audits, let the pressure settle until the weak spot shows. Mara sighed and leaned back against the sorting shelf. She pushes things through fast. Fills the board with people who owe her favors. If we object, she says we're undermining cohesion. I took out the spreadsheet Mike had given me and handed it to her. This isn't cohesion. This is targeting. Her hands hovered over the paper but didn't touch it. I know what it island, but if I say that aloud, I lose my seat. And if I lose my seat, there's no one left to even slow her down. Then help me another way, I said. I don't need a vote. I need one thing. Does she file demolition permits through the county or just push them through HOA channels? Mara finally looked me in the eye. I've never seen a permit. That was the crack I needed. If she's using unlicensed crews, if there are safety violations, She Island Mara cut me off, her voice barely above a whisper. She hires whoever gives her the lowest bid, no background checks, no safety logs. And you have proof? She hesitated again, then shook her head. Not directly, but I've seen the invoices. Some don't even list full contractor info. Just cash transfers and P.O. box addresses. That was enough. Not legal proof yet, but enough to get the sheriff's office interested. Enough to justify a deeper inspection. I didn't thank her. Not yet. She wasn't ready for that. Instead, I folded the spreadsheet back into my coat pocket and opened the door. As I left, I caught one last glimpse of her standing alone in the mailroom, shoulders curled forward, hands clenched around the shelf. She wasn't just afraid of Karen. She was afraid of what would happen if she admitted she'd been complicit. But fear only works until someone names it. I planned to name it loud enough that the whole county would hear. 2 days later, I woke to the sound of diesel engines. At first, I thought it was logging trucks. They sometimes passed the edge of the neighborhood on the way up to the quarry. But this wasn't passing. It was idling. I stepped out onto the front porch in bare feet. A bulldozer sat just off the gravel road near my property line, its steel blade lowered to the grass. Behind it, a flatbed trailer held a second machine, something heavier, industrial. A white pickup idled nearby, windows tinted. Then I saw her, Karen Whitmore, standing near the driver's side door in her tailored gray jacket, clipboard in one hand, coffee in the other. I walked toward the fence, heart already pounding. My phone was in my back pocket, live stream trigger prepped. I didn't touch it, not yet. Bit early for excavation, I called. She smiled without turning. Just staging equipment. We move fast when safety's involved. Safety? Karen glanced at me like she was bored. The board has decided your structure poses a community risk. Structural instability, rot, non-compliance. Per Section 4.3, we've authorized emergency mitigation. There's no Section 4.3, I said. She finally turned fully toward me. There is now. If you've ever seen someone so smug they rewrote the rules just to crush you, drop a comment below because this was textbook abuse of power. I took a breath, keeping my voice level. You filed a demolition permit with the city? Karen blinked once. We're a self-regulated HOA. We're allowed to act in emergency cases without outside approval. That was a lie, and a dangerous one. Because once heavy machinery crossed onto my land without city authorization, she wasn't just overreaching, she was liable. And if she got it wrong, the HOA would be on the hook for property damage, trespassing, even criminal negligence. You planning to enter my property today? I asked. Depends how quickly you comply. 48 hours expired this morning. My grip tightened around the fence post. My children are inside. Karen didn't flinch. That's your decision, Daniel. Then she turned, nodded toward the bulldozer operator, and climbed into her SUV. I watched the vehicle pull away, slow and smug, like the victory was already hers. But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. I waited until the taillights disappeared down the bend, then pulled out my phone and dialed Sheriff Alvarez. I didn't start with emotion. I started with the facts. Unauthorized heavy equipment on private property, I said. No permit visible. HOA claims emergency powers. Children inside the structure. Owner not served proper notice. Location? The dispatcher asked. I gave the address. Recording? Already backed up to 2 drives. You'll have a link in 3 minutes. They said someone would come by. They didn't say when. So I climbed up onto the deck and grabbed the GoPro I'd mounted under the eave. The feed was live and stable. The camera caught everything: Karen's car, the bulldozer, her clipboard. The moment she said, "That's your decision," it was time to start showing people what she really was. I uploaded the clip to a private link and hit send, first to the sheriff's office, then to the neighborhood group chat that had been quiet for months. Within 15 minutes, 4 neighbors texted back. One offered their ring cam footage from the corner. Another said they'd already reported a similar violation and been ignored. By noon, I had enough footage to prove that Karen's emergency was premeditated and, more importantly, unpermitted. She hadn't counted on me knowing how to read between legal lines. She thought I'd be scared, but she didn't understand. I knew the difference between a cracked beam and a failing system, and she was both. The bulldozer was still there the next morning, its blade inches from the easement line. No one touched it overnight, but that didn't mean it wasn't a threat. The real weapon wasn't the machine, it was the silence. Karen hadn't called, no email, no update, which meant she was waiting, watching. I didn't waste time. I grabbed my clipboard, a measuring wheel, and a can of marking spray. This wasn't about bluster anymore, it was about proof. The first thing I measured was the setback. HOA policy claimed a 10-foot buffer between any equipment and residential dwellings during active mitigation. I checked the blade position, 7 feet, 2 inches. I snapped the photo. Then I walked around the bulldozer and looked at the operator's ID tag taped to the glass. No license number, no contractor registration, just a nickname, Diesel Dave, written in Sharpie. That was my second photo. My boots crunched across the gravel shoulder as I moved down toward the flatbed trailer. One of the ratchet straps holding the secondary equipment was frayed. Not a little worn, split down the center like it had been baking in the sun for months. Any licensed contractor would have flagged that immediately. It was a transport violation, plain and simple. I sprayed a marker line by the torn strap and took the third photo. By the time I reached the road, I documented 5 separate safety issues: improper equipment staging, violation of HOA's own setback buffer, no visible, demolition permit, unlicensed operator, unsafe hauling practices. The kind of report that didn't just get attention, it triggered intervention. I uploaded the shots to my secure drive, time-stamped and GPS tagged. Then I called the one guy who wouldn't brush it off, Sheriff Alvarez. He picked up on the second ring. "Harkins. Sheriff, I've got documented violations. You want to see 'em?" A pause. Then, "How bad?" "Bad enough to warrant state inspection if this escalates." "You have proof?" "It's already uploading." Another pause. "Sit tight, I'll be by this afternoon." That was the first real crack in her armor. Karen thought the HOA bubble insulated her, that their bylaws somehow trumped state code. But that's not how it works. Not when you bring in outside authority, not when you can back your words with data. I sent a second copy of the report to the county building inspector's office, flagged for review. No accusation, just a concerned citizen inquiry. I knew they wouldn't move fast, but they didn't have to. I just needed them in motion. Paper trails mattered. As I walked back up the hill, Emily met me halfway down the driveway. "What'd you find?" she asked. "Enough," I said, "and more coming." She looked down at my hand. "Is that spray paint?" I couldn't help it. I smiled. Engineer's version of a battle line. She didn't laugh. She was too tired, too afraid. But she nodded. That was enough. Later that afternoon, I stood behind my fence and watched as Sheriff Alvarez's cruiser pulled in behind the flatbed. The operator, Diesel Dave, emerged from his pickup, looking confused. Alvarez didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he just walked slow, circled the equipment, and wrote in his notepad. Then he knocked on my gate. "Mind if I step in? Please." He followed me to the porch. I showed him the photos, the HOA's printed notice, and the spreadsheet of prior violations. He said nothing for a while. Finally, he handed the HOA notice back to me. No county seal, no valid contractor on file, no emergency permit submitted. She tries to move this thing without approval? She's on the hook, not you. That was the moment I knew I had leverage. Not speculation, not theory, real authority behind me. Karen had built her power on the assumption that no one would challenge her paperwork. But I didn't need to shout, I just had to measure. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sheriff had confirmed what I already suspected: Karen was bluffing her way into a demolition. But bluffs don't always stay on paper. Sometimes they're carried out by people who don't care what's legal, just what's ordered. And now the bulldozer was sitting 30 feet from where my kids were sleeping. I sat at the dining table long after Emily had gone to bed, blueprints scattered across the wood, engineering code manuals, printed photos, time-stamped violations. I had the ammunition, but the battle hadn't started yet, not until I checked my phone. The group chat had lit up again. Mike had posted something, a photo, grainy, taken at night. Karen talking to a man in a safety vest. She was pointing toward my cabin. A minute later, Carla chimed in, "That guy's not local. I've never seen him before. He's not part of the HOA crew." Mike followed up. They met in the parking lot behind the clubhouse, unmarked truck, plates covered. My stomach dropped. Karen wasn't just staging equipment anymore, she was staging action. I got up and stepped outside onto the porch. The bulldozer sat like a sleeping animal, half in shadow, no movement, no lights. But it felt different now, closer, somehow, like it was breathing. Inside, I rechecked the locks. I moved both kids to the back room and pushed a dresser in front of the side door. I didn't tell Emily everything, just that I had a feeling. The next morning, it all escalated. I was feeding the baby when the knock came. Not on the front door, on the kitchen window. Emily jumped. I set the spoon down and moved to the glass. A man in a yellow vest stood outside, face blank, clipboard in hand. "You, Daniel Harkins?" he asked through the glass. I nodded. "You're being served with an immediate compliance summons by the HOA board. Structure will be removed no later than 10 a.m. tomorrow. Equipment has been contracted. Entry authorized under emergency clause subsection B." "There is no subsection B," I said. He shrugged. "Not my call. I just show up." I opened the door a crack. "What company are you with?" He didn't answer. He just handed me the paper. No header, no signature, no permit stamp. Then he walked away. I watched him climb into the same unmarked pickup from Mike's photo. I didn't even wait. I grabbed my phone and dialed the sheriff again. "They're pushing forward," I said. "I was just served a fraudulent notice. There's a crew being assembled off record. You're sure it wasn't authorized?" "I'm sure. And I'm not letting them do this with my kids inside." There was a pause. Then, "Stay put. I'll be there by morning. Don't engage." But I wasn't just going to stay put. By now, Karen had made it personal. She wasn't just attacking the structure, she was endangering my family. That changed the rules. I walked the perimeter that evening with a flashlight, checking every access point. I positioned the secondary camera at the southeast corner, aimed directly at the road approach. Motion activated, time stamped, and synced to cloud storage. Then I added a second live stream trigger to my phone, this one set to auto broadcast if I didn't check in every 2 hours. It wasn't paranoia, it was protection, because Karen was gambling on silence, and I was done being quiet. Before bed, I sat with Emily in the kids' room. She didn't say much, just rested her hand on my leg while our daughter slept across her lap. "This wasn't supposed to be our life," she whispered. I nodded. "But we get to decide how it ends." Outside, the wind picked up across the lake, and for a moment, I remembered standing on this same property as a teenager, hammer in hand, next to my dad. He built this place to last. Now it was up to me to prove it could stand against anything, even her. I didn't expect Mara to call. Not after the way she looked in the mailroom, shoulders curled, fear thick in her throat like she was choking on it. But around 8:30 that night, she texted me one word: "Come." I left Emily with the kids and walked the 6 blocks to her house. The streets were dark, porch lights off, and motion sensors silent. Cedar Pines looked peaceful if you didn't know better. Mara met me at the gate, then led me around back. Her patio light was dim, casting more shadow than glow. A bottle of white wine sat open on the table, untouched. She didn't sit. She stood near the railing, arms crossed, eyes locked on something in the trees. "I saw the video," she said without turning. "The guy at your window. No logo, no permit, no signature, just a threat." I nodded. "Karen's not bluffing anymore." "She never was," Mara said quietly. "Just careful." Then she turned and finally looked at me. "You need to see something." She reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out a flash drive. Held it like it weighed 10 pounds. I downloaded the equipment invoices and board minutes from the last 4 months. Karen doesn't know I still have access. She made me switch to a separate login after the last vote, but I saved a back door just in case. I took it slowly, watching her face. She looked hollow, like the truth had already eaten half of her. "What's on here?" I asked. Proof she's been hiring unlicensed contractors through personal contacts. No formal bids, just cash payments, some of them through shell accounts tied to her cousin's construction outfit in Tacoma. And the permits? No filing, no approval. Just internal minutes claiming emergency resolution signed only by her. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "This is enough," I said. "Enough to bring the sheriff in officially. Maybe even the state." Mara sat down suddenly, like her knees had given out. I didn't want it to get this far. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet, I could stop worse from happening. I crouched beside her. "You've stopped it now." She shook her head. "Number, you will. I'm just getting out of the way." We sat there for a long minute. The wind moved through the pine trees overhead, brushing the back fence like a warning. "I grew up here," she said suddenly. "Karen wasn't always like this. She used to care. But somewhere along the line, the power started tasting better than the rules." I stood slowly, slipping the drive into my jacket. "People change. Systems don't." She looked up at me, eyes glassy. "What are you going to do with it?" "Send it to the sheriff tonight. Send it to the county building department. And make damn sure she can't move a single piece of equipment without someone showing up in uniform." Mara nodded. "If she finds out it came from me, she won't. And if she does, she'll be the one answering questions." By the time I left her backyard, my phone was already syncing the contents of the flash drive to 3 separate cloud folders. I copied the invoice list to PDF and attached the contractor records to my active case file. At 9:42 p.m., I sent it all to Sheriff Alvarez with the subject line, "Fraudulent HOA contracting evidence, requesting immediate intervention." No guesswork, no emotions. Just documentation. The reply came 13 minutes later. "Received. This changes things. I'll be at your property by 9:30 tomorrow. No one touches anything until we've spoken." I read the message twice, then once more. I stood in the middle of the dark sidewalk, phone in hand, and for the first time in days, I exhaled. Not because it was over, because now, finally, it had begun. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, out of focus. Mara's flash drive sat on the desk beside me, its files open across 2 monitors. Invoices, board minutes, demolition contracts with no dates, no insurance riders, no licensing info. She wasn't exaggerating. It was worse than I thought. Karen wasn't just reckless, she was exposed. Now it was my turn. I poured coffee, locked the door to my home office, and opened 3 browser tabs, one for the state's licensed contractor database, one for county building code requirements, and one for OSHA safety mandates. Every entry on that drive, I cross-referenced. I highlighted discrepancies in red: contractors with no license numbers, equipment ordered through personal Venmo accounts, site inspection forms stamped with only Karen's initials. My living room might have looked like chaos blueprints, code books, video screenshots, but this was my battlefield, and I knew how to build things that couldn't be torn down. At 2:34 a.m., I submitted a formal complaint to the State Department of Labor and Industries. Not an accusation, just a structured technical report. Attached screenshots, labeled each violation, offered GPS, coordinates, and time-stamped videos. Then I sent a second package to the county permitting office, this time flagging the absence of inspection filings. The subject line read, "Unauthorized demolition orders, HOA bypass practices under review." By 3:10, I had confirmation receipts from both, and I wasn't done. I drafted an affidavit summarizing the events of the past 10 days, attached the HOA notices Karen had posted on my cabin, and filed them into a legal folder labeled Preliminary Injunction Prep, just in case, because even if the sheriff shut her down tomorrow, I had to assume Karen wouldn't stop. Bullies don't quit when you push back, they just switch tactics. So, I gave her no angles. No technical wiggle room. Every claim she made, I countered with citation. Every threat she issued, I matched with statute. Every safety lapse, documented, backed up, mirrored 3 times across secure storage. At 4:07, I recorded a backup video for the stream, just in case she tried to act while I was asleep. The thumbnail was plain. Me, sitting at the desk, holding up a time-stamped copy of the permit register. I looked into the lens. Karen Whitmore authorized an unlicensed demolition. The crew she hired is not bonded. The equipment on my property violates both HOA policy and county law. If anything happens to this cabin, this stream becomes public, and every agency with jurisdiction will see it. I uploaded the file and set it to auto-publish if motion was detected near the cabin between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. Then I locked the feed. At 6 a.m., I finally stepped outside. The lake was still, the bulldozer hadn't moved, but the silence felt different this time. Not threatening, waiting. Emily met me on the porch, mug in hand, hair pulled back. She didn't ask what I'd done. She just looked at me like she already knew. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. Because this time, I wasn't reacting, I was executing. By 7:15, I had packed every document, printed every photo, and prepped 2 copies of everything, one for the sheriff, one for the city. I even printed an enlarged version of the fraudulent demolition order, Karen's fake signature, circled in red ink, and I made sure to leave a second camera rolling in the front window, facing the bulldozer. Its LED blinked steady, like a warning light. At 8:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Sheriff Alvarez, on my way. ETA 15 minutes. Wait for me," I smiled. Let her come now. Let her send her crew. This wasn't panic. It was pressure, applied precisely. And I'd spent my whole career learning exactly where to place it. The first thing I did was drop 3 envelopes into the community mailbox slot. One was addressed to Sheriff Alvarez, containing printed copies of the invoices, the HOA notice, and Mara's confession summary. The second was for the county building inspector, flagged with a cover sheet highlighting safety code violations. The third, Karen Whitmore, hand-delivered and time-stamped, no threats. Just a formal notice of owner dispute and pending external review. Let her read it and squirm. The law wasn't on her side anymore, and now she knew it. From the mailboxes, I cut across to Mike Tran's house. He'd offered his garage for the day, said he had some tools that might help. What he meant was 2 old laptops, a mobile hotspot, and a motion sensor drone with a GoPro mount. "You really going all in on this?" he asked as I unpacked my drives. "Wouldn't you?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I just never thought anyone would actually fight her this way." I synced the drone's camera to the second livestream backup, set it to trigger from 9:25 a.m. onward 5 minutes before the sheriff's arrival, just in case Karen tried to make a move before he got there. Every second of footage would auto-back up to 3 cloud locations. Next, I printed copies of Mara's flash drive logs, redacted for her protection, and tucked them into 5 separate folders. I handed them to neighbors I knew I could trust. Carla took hers in silence, eyes narrowed with something between anger and relief. "About time someone put her on her heels," she said. "If you need anything, doors are open." The tide was shifting. I could feel it in the way people spoke, the way they stood a little straighter when Karen's name came up. She wasn't a force of nature anymore. She was a problem with an expiration date. By 9:05 a.m., I was back at the cabin. I swept the porch again, checked the perimeter, reset the main feed angle. Emily sat on the couch with the kids, eyes on the window, arms wrapped around them like a shield. "You okay?" I asked. She looked up. "Just tell me when it's over." I kissed her forehead. "Soon." At 9:17, I got the text I'd been waiting for. Sheriff Alvarez, turning onto Lakeview now. "Be ready. I want it clean. Clean. That's what this was about. Not revenge. Not spectacle, clarity, documentation, chain of accountability." I stepped out onto the porch. The bulldozer still hadn't moved, but the pickup truck was back, the same unmarked one from the photo. Diesel Dave was leaning against it, arms crossed. He saw me and smirked. "Big day," he called out. I didn't respond, just tapped the front of my jacket, where the body cam was clipped and blinking. He looked away. At 9:23, Karen's black SUV pulled up behind the equipment. She stepped out with her usual clipboard and designer sunglasses, like she was showing up to a ribbon cutting. I let her come to me this time. "No point delaying this," she said. "Emergency order stands. The structure is scheduled for removal." I didn't answer, just turned my wrist and checked the time. 9:27. "I assume you've read the response I left in your mailbox?" I said. She smiled without warmth. "You're not the first homeowner to panic at enforcement." "No," I said, "but I'll be the first to have a sworn officer and a county inspector here before your crew so much as scratches the topsoil." She blinked. I tilted my head toward the drone, now rising quietly behind me. "You're being recorded from 3 angles, and you're standing on ground you have no legal right to alter." Her clipboard dipped an inch. "Last chance, Karen," I said. "Step back. Or step down." The road behind her filled with headlights. The sheriff's cruiser. Karen turned. Her moment was over. Sheriff Alvarez stepped out of his cruiser like he already knew what he'd find. He wore mirrored sunglasses, but I didn't need to see his eyes to read the set of his jaw. He wasn't here to make suggestions. He was here to make a call. Karen straightened immediately, that practiced HOA smile stretching back into place. "Sheriff, thank you for coming. I'm glad someone's taking this situation seriously. The structure's been a known hazard for—" "Step aside, ma'am," he said, cutting her off. "I'll speak to the property owner first." Her lips tightened, but she moved, barely. I met him halfway up the gravel drive, drone still circling above us, recording everything. "Everything I told you last night is in this packet," I said, handing him the folder. "Photos, violations, fraudulent contracting, unauthorized access to property, no emergency permit, no inspection file." He flipped it open, scanned the first page, then tucked it under his arm. "Where's the equipment operator?" "Over by the truck. Name's Dave. No license number, no proof of insurance. Working off an unsigned invoice from a P.O. box in Tacoma." Alvarez's eyes didn't move, but I saw the lines deepen at the corner of his mouth. "Let me speak with him." I nodded and followed as he approached the unmarked pickup. Diesel Dave straightened a little when he saw the badge. "Name and company, son." Dave Lister. Subcontractor for," he paused, "Cedar Pines Modernization Initiative." "That a real business?" Dave scratched the back of his neck. "I mean, I got the job through someone Karen knows. I don't sign the checks. Do you have a license to operate that machine on private property?" Dave didn't answer. Alvarez let the silence stretch. "Do you have a demolition permit filed with the county?" "I was told I didn't need one." "By who?" Dave looked toward Karen. "Stay right here," Alvarez said, and turned back toward her. She was already mid-spin, trying to call someone on her phone, voice low and clipped. "Miss Whitmore," he said, sharply. "End that call." She froze, lowered the phone. He walked up to her slowly, his voice low but crystal clear. "You authorized demolition without a permit. You hired unlicensed operators. You failed to notify law enforcement of a hazardous structure report, and you bypassed all channels of county inspection." Karen swallowed hard. "Our bylaws allow emergency mitigation. Your bylaws don't supersede state law." Her silence cracked something in the air. I stepped forward. "There's a live stream recording of her attempting to act on these threats with my family inside the structure. That video's backed up to 4 locations. One of them was sent to your department this morning." He didn't look at me, just nodded once. Then he turned to face her fully. "If a single piece of equipment crosses onto this property today, I will be forced to detain the operator and open a formal criminal investigation into your leadership conduct." Karen's face flushed deep red. "You're siding with him?" "I'm siding with the law." It was quiet after that. Even the wind seemed to stop. Diesel Dave climbed back into his pickup without a word and turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, and slowly, almost reverently, he reversed the truck down the hill. The bulldozer stayed idle, unmanned. Karen stood motionless as the sheriff walked past her, back to his cruiser. "You'll be hearing from the county," he said, not even looking over his shoulder. She didn't move. I didn't either. I just stood there on my porch while the last piece of her plan fell apart. She came here with steel. I met her with truth. And now the power had shifted. They packed the HOA clubhouse like it was election night. Every chair was filled. Some neighbors stood along the walls, arms crossed, lips tight. Others leaned in the doorways. Whispers traveled faster than the ceiling fans could push them away. Karen sat at the front table, flanked by 2 board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Her blazer was ironed crisp, makeup perfect. But her eyes didn't stop scanning the room. She could feel it, the shift. I stood near the back wall, arms crossed, folder in hand. Sheriff Alvarez wasn't late. He walked in at 7 p.m. Sharp, hat in hand, county file tucked under one arm. The murmur quieted as soon as he stepped forward. Karen rose. "Sheriff, thank you for agreeing to attend. I'm sure we can clear this up quickly." He didn't smile. "I'm not here to clear anything up, Miss Whitmore. I'm here to report findings." That shut the room down. He turned toward the crowd. "At the request of multiple residents, I've conducted a preliminary investigation into HOA-led enforcement actions taken over the last 60 days. Specifically, actions involving unauthorized equipment use, property trespass, and emergency mitigation without permit. Mara Jensen was seated off to the side, her hands clenched around her knee. I caught her eye. She nodded once, barely visible. Alvarez continued. We confirmed the use of unlicensed contractors, lack of demolition permits, and direct threats made to residents outside proper legal notice. A cease and desist has been issued to the HOA regarding structural enforcement actions until further review by the county. Someone in the room clapped, then someone else. It spread slowly, awkwardly, until Karen held up her hand. This is a misunderstanding, she said. There have been conflicting reports, and Ma'am, Alvarez interrupted, this isn't open for spin. I have copies of contractor payments made from HOA discretionary funds to accounts not listed on your quarterly reports. That hit like a body blow. Mara closed her eyes. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone murmured, "Wait, our dues?" Alvarez turned back toward the room. I also have testimony from a board member confirming those decisions were made, unilaterally, without full board votes. Those documents have been forwarded to county council. Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. And that's when I stepped forward. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. For the past 3 weeks, Karen Whitmore has attempted to bulldoze a privately owned, legally protected structure, my cabin, without a permit, without cause, and with my children inside. Every head turned. She issued fraudulent violation notices, threatened fines, blocked contractors from servicing my property. And when I refused to back down, she brought in a crew with no licenses, no insurance, and no authorization. My voice stayed level, measured. She gambled we'd all stay quiet, that no one would question the rules, that fear would work better than fact. I held up my folder. I've submitted every file to the sheriff. I've shared copies with the county. And if needed, I'll testify publicly. Because this wasn't just about one house, it was about how far someone can go when no one stands up. The silence after that wasn't empty, it was charged. Alvarez nodded once. Miss Whitmore, you're hereby notified that any further enforcement action by your office, without external oversight, will be considered unlawful interference. You will remain under review pending county action. Karen didn't respond. She just stared straight ahead, face frozen. Someone stood, then another. Mike Tran raised his voice. I move to suspend Karen Whitmore as acting president of the HOA pending investigation. Seconded. Then a vote. Hands up, every hand but 2, Karen's included. It was done. I stepped outside into the warm night, the door swinging shut behind me. The cabin still stood, but now so did we. The lake was glass. Evening light stretched across the surface in long ribbons of gold, touching every corner of the dock like a promise kept. Emily sat beside me, her feet dangling just above the water, our son curled asleep against her shoulder. The cabin stood behind us untouched, quiet, ours. Karen resigned 3 days after the vote. Technically, the county gave her a choice: step down or face a formal audit, public hearings, and possible criminal charges. She chose the back door, slipping out with a press release and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The board held an emergency election. Mara didn't run, but she helped organize it. Mike was elected interim president. Carla volunteered for policy review. Turns out, a lot of people had been waiting for someone to flip the switch. The sheriff's investigation is still open, but the equipment's gone, the contractors never came back, and every letter Karen ever issued is being audited line by line. The county's even creating a task force to monitor HOA actions across the region. Something about precedent-setting interference with private property. I just call it accountability. Emily reached over and laced her fingers through mine. Feels different now. It is, I said. It's not just safer, it's stronger. We sat in silence for a while. The wind moved softly through the trees, rustling the leaves in low harmony. A kingfisher darted low across the water, disappearing beyond the bend. This place, it's not perfect. The siding still needs paint. The dock still creaks where Dad's old nail gun misfired. But that's the thing about legacy. It's not supposed to be polished. It's supposed to stand. I used to think I was just holding on to this cabin for sentimental reasons. But now I know better. I was defending something sacred. Not just a roof, but a truth. A truth about what's worth fighting for. Because it's easy to fold, to let the clipboard and the threats and the fine print wear you down. That's what people like Karen count on. But if you stand your ground, if you shine a light, and push back the right way, sometimes the whole system has to blink. The dock groaned beneath us as Emily shifted her weight. What now? She asked. Now? I looked out across the water, watching the last light catch the trees. Now we help other people do the same. Because it's not just about one cabin. It's about every person who's ever been bullied into silence, every family that's ever been threatened out of their home, every community that's been ruled by fear disguised as order. That stops here. So if you're watching this, if someone's ever tried to take what matters to you under the cover of rules, process, or paperwork, remember, the law still matters, but you have to show up with it in your hands. I'll leave you with this. My dad once told me, son, don't build something that just looks good. Build something that'll hold, even after you're gone. Now I understand what he meant. And I'm going to keep building. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.